There we go. So now we're going to go to Chicago's own
Hmm.
Common. I think he was all of 24 years old when this album came out, his second one.
Yep.
Um, Josh, what did you pick for the song in the montage?
Well, how could it be anything other than I used to love her? Um,
Right, like his first big hit. Yep.
yeah, that is the clear standout, or at least exemplifying track for this album for me.
Were you able to catch that that was a an allegory, Josh, as opposed to just the tale of love about a
Yes.
person? Yeah, okay,
Well,
good. Yeah,
he
just
did
making
say
sure.
it at the end as well. Just
Yes,
for
he
all
does.
of
I was about
you
to say
that-
he does lay it out for the mats of the world who may
Yeah.
not have picked up. Yeah, so
But yeah, he was. This is his second album, I believe. It's actually
it
the
is. Yep.
third highest rated on best ever albums, behind 2000's Like Water for Chocolate
Which we will cover.
and 2005's B, which I think is the first Common album I heard.
Which we'll also cover. Yep. I think
Yep.
my first one wasn't this one.
Yeah.
It was the one between this one and Like Water for Chocolate.
Yep.
Whose name is escaping me right now.
Yep. And he was actually known as Common Sense at this time, and then transitioned to the Common name. So that
Yes, a ska band sued him because there was a ska band
Really?
called Common Sense. Yes,
didn't
I
know
found
that.
that out in my research. Yes.
hilarious. But yeah, this is a strong album, another strong hip hop album. Common is pretty special at this time period. I think he has a really strong command of wordplay and song structure in his rapping. He has good, metaphors or comparisons in his songs. He has interesting way of pausing and delivering, or ending um, a, a line one way, but then continuing the line on the next stanza or verse, and continuing that theme. So there's some interesting pauses there. I thought the sample choice, we need to shout out No ID as the producer on this album. I think that's a strong element and contributor to what makes this album pretty great.
For sure.
And so you've got great sample selections here. His selections are very kind of jazz inspired, I would say. It's a lot of not beats per se. Well, there's beats, but it's also just, I don't know, jazz music. It's pretty evident when you listen to it. And what else did I write? He has great verbal wordplay. I Used to Love Her is obviously an extended metaphor for hip hop that becomes apparent, if not until the end. I think he has interesting song choices, like Communism. That was an interesting one. The chapter 13 I liked later on, and that's a good track with the story and kind of the interplay between the rappers. He has some guest rappers on there, and he really kind of like paints a good portrait of like him at that time period, and also like kind of shout outs to Chicago at different times, and kind of painting, not necessarily stories, but slice of life. I don't know. I kind of got like a good sense of like what Chicago rap scene was like at that time, and kind of what his life was like at that time. Or at least a sense of kind of emotion or feeling of what he was, going on in his life at that time. And
I mean, hell, you even got his father rapping in the last track.
right. Yeah. That's
I wasn't
true.
quite sure what the theme of that was, but like, yeah. Was he glorifying the old days or saying they were bad? I didn't. Anyway, that's a
Yep.
whole different conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, they have there is some kind of skit interlude songs on here, but they're pretty short and sweet. And I don't know, I think there's not really, for it being a longer album at almost an hour, it works pretty well throughout. It flows well, and there's a lot of meat on the bone here for this album and for his style. I think we've heard a lot of rap so far, but in the 90s we haven't heard somebody necessarily quite like him. He's bringing his own unique flavor to delivery and song or music choice in his rapping. So it's a thumbs up for me. It's a good album.
Yeah, I would give this one a thumbs up as well. It's interesting um, thematically, this album, because it's part like consciousness hip hop, and he very much wants you to know he's like a thinking man's rapper with like a more worldly take. But then there's also a part of it that's and even in the samples, the production, right? It's not just heavy beats and stuff. It's more jazz. It's more varied variety of what's coming at you. So he's already got sort of that consciousness part of the hip hop that would pretty much become, I think, his brand as he progressed through the decade and even made the transition into acting and stuff like that. He's kind of like a thinking man's rapper. He writes really good individual verses, and he's a great storyteller. Along the way, there are a lot of things I wrote down of like pretty fantastic like bars in his songs that
Yep.
just jumped up. I became familiar with him in combo from One Day It'll All Make Sense, as well as going backwards. And when I found that, somebody's like, oh, I used to love her and Resurrection and stuff from the Resurrection album, right? Those two singles were the ones that I got led to, and they're the two that I picked for the playlist as well. But there also is a little bit of like, I'm a 24-year-old guy.
Yeah.
Like, it's like celebrating black women, but also at times there's still a little bit of like, I'm not all the way grown up yet, and a little bit of like, I'm from Chicago and, posturing. Just enough peeks through, right? That you realize he's trying to figure out his way in the world a little bit. But he's self-aware, right? Like, he's aspiring to be something different and talks about that. But go ahead, Josh. I know you were going to jump in.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the youth comes through in his delivery and lyrics and kind of attitude, and there is some posturing, but just the overconfidence of youth, I would say too, and kind of the swagger that he brings in his delivery as well. He's not really necessarily like denigrating other people or
Well, he's still writing lyrics like, if poetry was pussy, I'd be sunshine. You know what I mean? Like, that would kind of be like, out of his repertoire.
Yep.
A little later. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but like, I don't think he would have written that in 2000 like he did in 1994.
Right. So yeah.
But go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, it's a different. If you follow Common through his career, this is the young man version of him.
Right. Yeah, and you're right. The beats and the production are varied. It's really well produced album. He's the equivalent of like a bright shining prospect right now. I think he was even named like, I think The Source or one of The Source or one of the hip hop album magazines, like best unsigned artist of '92, which was how he kind of got on the radar of some of my friends who were like hip hop heads early, who were aware and kind of turned me on a little bit later to what he was doing.
Yep.
So people recognized that this was a guy with, unusual talent, and he does. There aren't a lot of people who have the verbosity of what he's writing about, and the ability to do rhyme schemes and referential hip hop and wordplay, right? He exists in all of those. Storytelling, right? He could do all the different variations of how to write hip hop verses, and he's got a good flow that doesn't wear you out. You don't get tired of it, right? It's got dexterity to it. I think, and it's also, it doesn't sound like either coast. And it's certainly not Southern either. So like, that's the Midwesternness of it, right? Like, it's kind of like, that's how he doesn't sound anything like Eminem, but that's kind of like how Eminem is too. He seems like an alien because there just really isn't a hip hop scene in Detroit, right? Just like Chicago has one, but it's sort of divorced from the traditional centers of hip hop. And so that's like a superpower he kind of has too. Probably I'd say he's kind of like the Midwest's Rakim would be a good correlation. And certainly, I mean, I first saw Common live, I don't know if it was 99 or 2000, as part of the Spit Kickers tour was the name of the tour, where he was touring with people like Pharoah Monch and Mos Def and De La Soul, right? And there were a lot of rappers that were part of like that movement, right? I just mentioned a bunch, like Talib Kweli, Jurassic 5. I mean, we can keep going. There were a bunch. I think Biz Markie was on that tour as well, and he kind of was in that lane. So, and we're seeing more and more of this like alternate hip hop lane, like outside of like the harder edge like gangster or street rap, you know what I mean? And outside of like the dance party rap, this is like its own lane. And I don't want to be lazy and call it like consciousness rap, right? And stuff like that. But it's a good term in the sense that it kind of tries to talk about the community and the condition and societal stuff and personal relationships and growth and spirituality, right? Philosophy are all there. And there's also, we haven't really got to it yet, but it's coming. There's also like like an R&B and hip hop, like R&B, I should say, like lane in this as well, that runs in conjunction with it. And we haven't really done like D'Angelo and Maxwell and stuff like that yet, but that's coming as well, right?
Yep.
That's going to be Erica Badu, right?
Yep.
A lot of stuff like that.
Jill Scott.
Yes,
Yep.
there's more, but we won't just keep running it off. But there's
Yeah.
there's that's coming too, and it was a nice little lane in the '90s as a compare and contrast. And also, I think it was trying to. There was like an Afrocentrism to it, but not in a way that wasn't expansive enough to appeal outside of it. You know what I mean? It was universal while also celebrating blackness, I'd say, is a common theme of what Common is doing. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, really good album, and especially, I mean, he'll do stuff that I like better than this. But that's not to say that there's not a lot to like on this album, and the length, it didn't overstay its welcome either. It was a really solid length. So, yep, comfortable thumbs up for me.
And I'm seeing here too that he has an album coming out tomorrow with Pete Rock called the Auditorium Volume 1, and of Pete Rock and CL Smooth. He covered that single a while back. Another great track. But yeah, it's going to have guest appearances by Jennifer Hudson, Bilal, PJ, and De La Soul's Posthumous. So it looks like a highly anticipated album, and Common has said he wants to be a dream to be part of one of the great MCs of hip hop, and on the level of De La Soul, Tribe Called Quest, KRS-One, and Ice Cube. And he's been a dream of mine to work with Pete Rock, he said. So it looks like, yeah, I'll be interested to check that out.
Yeah, wow, talk about timing. So I
Yeah,
might have
really.
to check that one out this week too.
Yeah.